In a market that gets increasingly competitive, get more sales is a directive that's coming from more than just the sales manager. The concept is easy, achieving it a bit more challenging. Everyone is after everyone else's markets and customers. While persistence is still the foundation of success, to win in today's market, we also need to be a bit more strategic. And that leaves the question of how do we do this? I'm Jane Singer, and welcome back to A Seat at the Table, where we bring together our awesome audience, now in over 134 countries, with some of the smartest and most innovative people who join us here as guests on this show. Meet Karl Becker, the CEO of Improving Sales Performance and author of Iceberg Selling. Karl suggests that one of the keys to successful selling centers around mindset. In his work, he has identified a series of mindsets that can empower salespeople to succeed, even in difficult selling situations. Today, he'll be discussing how the lifetime value mindset changes the way salespeople interact with customers, how to use iceberg selling to overcome some of the challenges salespeople are facing, why it's important for salespeople to author their own stories, and helping salespeople to go from good to great. The most successful sales teams have one thing in common: strong leadership. However, finding those talented leaders is not always easy. In fact, in a competitive market, it's gotten to be a lot more difficult. And that's why leading organizations are turning to AsiaNet consultants. They have over 3 decades of boots-on-the-ground experience, giving them critical market knowledge and contacts. To learn more about AsiaNet Consultants, check out their website at asianetconsultants.com. I'll also leave a link in the show notes. Meanwhile, let's sit down with Karl and take our sales performance to the next level. Karl, thank you so much for joining us here. It is really wonderful to have you on A Seat at the Table. I'm really interested in what you have to talk about today, because I think as we head into the new year, or even for people who might be listening to this later in the year, sales is something that all of us have to lean into. We have to get better at it. We have to be more productive. It's no longer the old, just keep doing what you've always been doing and, hopefully get good results.
That's totally right. And I think anybody out there that knows they have to make payroll, or they're saving up for something, or they're paying for their parents' retirement or their kids' college or whatever it is, sales is the lifeblood of everything. And what's crazy to me is we just don't talk about it that often. And you certainly don't learn it in school. And if anything, there's all of us running around with head trash of I don't want to be salesy. I don't want to be pushy. I don't want to this. I don't want to that. And we have sales glorified in these movies where you have to be this hotshot guy who's slick and who, is really aggressive. And that's what a great salesperson is. And I got to tell you, that's not the truth. The truth is salespeople are some of the most caring, understanding, great listeners that I've ever met. And I want to bring that message forward, that just because you see things on the media, what sales should be, it doesn't have to be that. It can be just about being a guide and understanding.
That's so true. And I'm really glad you brought that up, because it's true. We do get stuck in terms of thinking in terms of stereotypes, right? Oftentimes those stereotypes stick in our head and we think that that's the role model. Now, I think that usually when we think about the key to sales success, aside from that sort of slick approach that you've just described, we think of it in terms of simply persistence. And I'm sure that's part of it. It is. But in your new book, Iceberg Selling, you talk about the importance of mindset. How does what you refer to as lifetime value mindset change the way salespeople interact with their customers?
Yeah, I am so glad you said that and asked me that. So I come in as a consultant, and I've been in sales, run my own companies, been involved in business ever since I was a little kid, selling Girl Scout cookies door to door for my sister, or pushing a lawnmower around the neighborhood to try to drum up business so that I could buy whatever I wanted to buy as a 5th grader or 6th grader or 8th grader, right? So I go into sales organizations often, and the intent's there, the heart's there. But for some reason, there's this kind of almost a stranglehold. I think in sports, you might call it we hold the bat too tight. And it's just we got to make our numbers by the end of the month, then the quarter, da, 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 da. And there's all this pressure that I'm going to say is oftentimes artificial, especially in the small, mid-sized businesses where we do have ability to be more nimble. And I'm not saying that, you don't need to make sales and it gets scary. I've been an entrepreneur where, it's the end of the month and I'm sweating bullets of how am I going to pay for things? But ultimately, a lifetime value mindset is really about shifting the way you think about sales from I need this sale, I need to make money, I need to close this, A, B, C, always be closing, to wait a minute, can I play for a lifetime value? What if this customer, bought from me not once, but 10 times? What
Mhm.
if they moved to another company, they called me? What if I moved to another company and I called them? What if I had a lifetime relationship with this person? Wouldn't that be more valuable and fulfilling? So the whole concept of lifetime value is like taking a step back and kind of getting real with yourself. And if you're a sales manager or business owner, getting real with your sales team and saying, do I get this person's world that I'm selling to? Do I really understand what's going on in their life? And if so, can I? And this kind of gets to the next one of being of service mindset. But the whole concept here is like, I need to think bigger than the transaction. And when I do that, possibilities happen. And typically, that's what your really great salespeople do. They're thinking long term, they're thinking deep. They're not just thinking of that transaction, that thing that they hope happens by the end of the month.
I think that's so important to point out because we do tend to think of that. We tend to be goal oriented. Everybody is brought up, even if you're not in sales, to be goal oriented. And so, therefore, we're going for the goal. We're going to get that goal as fast as we can. And as you're pointing out, we often overlook other aspects of things that lead to probably longer term success. But we're so focused on achieving that short term success, we're in a hurry, right? So I think it's very important that you brought that up. When we're looking at sales, what do you see as some of the common challenges that salespeople face today? I mean, I know that there are certain things that are always the case, but do you see anything in particular today?
I do. And I think the first thing I want to do is just kind of put a little bit of the new book, the whole concept of an iceberg. The whole kind of thesis or ethos of what I'm trying to bring forward is everybody, everything's an iceberg, and we only see 10%. And yet we run around making decisions like we know everything, right? But we don't. And so think about the risk you're taking, whether it's in your personal relationships or with someone you're selling to, or even if someone you're managing, if you're making assumptions of that 10% that you see that you know everything and you can provide the solution or whatever it might be. So I just want to kind of put that in that parking lot and let people think about that for a minute, that as we're talking, that's one of the big things that is out there is I think we're so used to now, if you're doing anything with digital marketing, is this a bottom of the funnel lead? Is this a sales qualified lead? Is this person going to buy right now? And I've got to tell you, I've been in a lot of different verticals in a lot of businesses nationally and internationally. And a spoiler alert, not many people show up going, take my money, I'm ready to buy. And
Right.
yet I think we're trained that way. And I think, unfortunately, marketing sometimes train that way with the pressure that's put on marketing. I'm a huge fan of sales and marketing. Is that, is this person going to buy? When are they going to buy? And we have this conversation about the outcome versus the journey. And so I think it starts to condition our salespeople. And even if you're a business owner selling for yourself, that, if you're not finding people that are ready to buy right now, there's something wrong. And I don't think that's true. I think there's something wrong if we believe that's the reality. Because where I come from and all the different businesses I've been in, I'm still selling to people, and people need to trust each other and they need to build rapport and we need to understand. And we have to see that 90% under the surface if we really want to be of service. So I would say that's one of the biggest things I see right now is this kind of extra pressure and focus and language around people needing to be ready to buy. And why don't I have more leads that are ready to buy, and thinking that we just need salespeople to be order takers. And I just, like I said, I don't find that true.
I think that's really interesting and it's so important because I think you touch on what we often call in marketing as know, like, and trust. And we often want to get to the buy, right? Before we've gone through the know, the like, and the trust process, which has a timeline in front of it, right? That people don't want to accept the fact that you have to start and give yourself runway before you can actually land that sale, so to speak. I think that it's important that you're bringing that up because it isn't something that people like, but it's something that we have to understand as part of the process.
Yeah, it's true. And I'll tell you a really fast story that I love. I love this story. So I was brought into a professional services company as like a fractional sales leader, co-pilot, if you will, with the senior partners of this firm. And so I'm running a weekly sales meeting, which is like part your normal sales meeting, but part of workshop. Like we're learning stuff, we're role playing, we're processing, we're looking at the funnel, like we're We're learning as a team. We're working to build ourselves as a team. I simply asked this question. I said, for our workshop today, I want you to pretend that you're going to Las Vegas to the #1 trade show in our industry to sell, and all of our customers are there. And I want you to tell me the situation you want to be in and what you're going to say. And I intentionally started with the youngest, like least seasoned salesperson. And he goes, oh, I'm in the coffee line. It's a coffee bar. And I see the guy in front of me. He has a sweater on and it's embroidered with the name of his firm. And I just said, hey, are you here? And do you buy this particular service? And we're really good at it. And we're fast, we're cheap, we're, all like he's hitting every button, trying to show that he has a handle on value. And he goes, and then the guy would go, yeah, that would be great. Let's talk. And I go, hey, nothing what he said was terribly wrong. It was just funny how he framed that he's going to meet this guy and this guy's going to be immediately ready to buy. So I go around, It's on Zoom. So I go around the rest of the quote room and I go to the senior partner and I let her go last intentionally. I said, tell me what your scenario is. She says, Karl, I'd be in an airplane. I'd sit down. The person would walk down and on their computer bag would have their logo of their firm. I would know it'd be a good fit. And I would simply say, are you going to Las Vegas for the show? Oh yeah, why? Tell me about that. How long have you been in? Are you willing to talk for a little bit on this flight? And I would just explore who they were. Really the 90% under the iceberg, right? And at the end, she goes, Karl, I would say, hey, I'm going to be at the show too. If you'd like to meet up, it would be great. My company does X, Y, and Z. If you'd ever like to talk to me about that, here's my card. And it just showed the maturity of that salesperson and the willingness to be patient and in the moment and learn and learn and learn and learn and learn and listen and listen and listen until it was time to say the right thing, where the other guy was like all about rushing it and getting it to the magical words that he thought was going to happen. She sold like 5 or 10x that other every year. So I kind of feel like the numbers speak for themselves. But yeah, I think a big part of sales is understanding, and we forget it's kind of meeting people where they are, making sure we understand who they are, and then being a guide, just trying to move them forward. And if we're not the right fit, being willing to step out of the way and be of service and tell them we're not a fit and move on to the next one.
Yes, I think that's very true. And it is very easy to get caught up in the moment, get excited when you see someone who you think could be a great customer, a sale that you think you can close. But you're right, you have to be willing to have that restraint and take all the steps that you're pointing out to be able to sort of nurture that customer along, see if they are a good fit for what you're selling. So I think it's really important that you brought that up and that people understand that, even though it's difficult to execute on that when you're trying to reach goals, whether they be monthly goals or quarterly goals. Now, you talk about the drivership mindset. What's that? I mean, how can it actually create urgency and move opportunities forward?
Yeah, thank you. So, this came the origin story of this, even though I think I was always practicing drivership mindset and as a young entrepreneur, as someone that's grown companies, it's always been up to me. I always am like, okay, I'm going to have to move it forward. Now, sometimes to my own detriment as a business owner, where I'm not empowering other people around me. And as I've gotten older in my career, I've learned I need to do that. So I'm going to kind of frame it up as what we're talking about with drivership is your teammate, if you're a manager or an owner, or if you're the salesperson, you're the contributor, I really want you to think about drivership. And what that simply means is you are not a passenger of your success. You're the driver. And if we think about a passenger, right, maybe they get to change the music. Maybe they can say, hey, can we get off on this next exit for a bathroom break? But other than that, they're literally a passive person within that experience. And this came from working with a bunch of companies where the owners would get so frustrated. Hey, how come my sales guys are leaving at 4:00? How come they're leaving at 5:00? How come they roll in late? What's going on? Even to the point where I would see that salesperson got a lead at say 4:50 p.m. And they're like, I guess I'll get to it tomorrow. And I think all of us in sales, we know in our hearts that time kills deals, right? So the business owners is going, look, I'm trying to support these salespeople with everything that they want, marketing, resources, sales trainers. I'm bringing in Karl, like all these things. But yet they're not showing up in a way where they're really owning their own success. They're not getting into action. And drivership is really tied to an ownership mindset where it's like, no one's going to come for you.
Right.
You are on your own to be successful. And once you have that mindset of like, oh, I'm the owner of my own success. I'm accountable for my life. Then drivership is like getting into action. Like, you know what? I am going to stay 5 more minutes or 10 more minutes or 30 minutes, or I'm going to do things that set myself up to win, that puts me in the driver's seat of my own success. I'm not going to let things stand in the way. And I think oftentimes salespeople are worried from prior traumas or head trash or prior managers or how they grew up, where they went to school, that they can't always stand up for themselves and make things happen. And I'm just here to tell you that in sales, you were hired to do just that. You were hired to make things happen. That's your job. And so drivership mindset is just kind of a general reminder of saying, hey, as a salesperson, if you want to help other people, if you want to help yourself, if you want to help your company, if you want to help that customer client on the other end of the phone or Zoom or in person or whatever, then be the driver. Make it happen. Get to that destination. Don't be shy. Make it happen. And it's one of the things I love, because I think really great salespeople listen, and they also know when to act. And when they act intentionally and deliberately.
We're going to take a quick break now, and then we'll be right back.
We were hiring when we were making 50 to 100K monthly losses.
And why? Welcome to episode 1.
I can't think of a single founder who's been around for a decent amount of time in business who hasn't had their tunnel of year. This was that year. We're going to be okay, yeah, Sheree. Some are going to hear this and think, you TDP. But hear me out. You only have to do the math to understand that very soon we were $500,000 down.
Yes, I think that's really something that we have to think about, because so often, I think more now than previously, people don't take ownership of things. They don't have that drivership mindset, right? They feel that it's up to somebody else. They feel that there's other things that might be standing in their way. They don't realize that a lot of that is in their own hands, and they need to put their hands on the wheel and sort of drive the bus forward, as you're saying. Now, speaking of ownership and taking ownership of things, you also mention in your book ownership mindset. And you say that it empowers salespeople to author their own stories. How does that work? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think I'll do it in a story format.
Okay.
So
Perfect.
I was in a company in kind of that same role I described earlier, where I'm like kind of a co-pilot, supporting the sales leader and also supporting the individual salespeople. And so I start to know the organization really well. We almost become like family. Like we know more than just the numbers, right? If you say, do I get their world? I would say, yes, I get their world. And I could tell you all about it. And I think that's also a great trait of a great consultant and a great salesperson and a great leader. You understand the world of the people around you. So the senior partner had an account that was starting to grow, doing really well. And he had very personal connections with this account. But the senior partner's like, I need to run the company. I can't be the person servicing everything. And so he taps this woman who I was coaching, who's kind of this up and coming star, to take over this account. So he sends her an email, gives her all the account information, says, I want you to run with this. And what that means to me is you own it. This is your account. And every week would go by and I would talk to this owner, the senior partner. He'd be like, hey, what's ever happening with that? And I'm like, well, every time I talk to her, she says she's reached out. He's like, Karl, this doesn't make any sense. Like, this could be a top 5 account for her. And it's been 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Nothing's happening. What's going on? And so finally, I had a conversation with this woman. And I said, hey, do you realize you own this account? She goes, yeah. I go, what does that mean? And she goes, well, when I go into HubSpot and I put it in there, I'm the account owner. My name's associated with it. I'm like, okay, and what else? Well, Bob has given me this account to grow. Okay, so what are you going to do? And she kind of kept like going, what do you mean? I was like, well, can I, instead of asking you a bunch of coaching questions where I hope you get the answer, can I just tell you what I think Bob wanted you to do and what you should do from an ownership? She's like, oh my God, please, yes, tell me. And I said, first of all, ownership means you're accountable for it. You can call the shots. You can make it happen. And right now it looks like you're not doing anything except sending an email every now and then, which to me feels like it's mailing it in. We all know this could be a top 5 account, but what have you done to truly own it? Like, why didn't you call Bob and say, hey, Bob, tell me all the background on this? Why do you think this could be a top 5 account? What are the things I should know? Have you done that yet? Well, no, I didn't know I was supposed to. Whoa, light bulb, right? Okay, well, maybe you didn't know you were supposed to, but did it dawn on you that you could do that? Well, I guess, or did you, right? And I wasn't trying to be mean. It was kind of like this place where kind of deer in the headlights.
Right.
Like, I don't think it dawned on her what ownership really, really meant. And I also think it was on me and on Bob to have been like, hey, this is what ownership means, right? Do the research, go onto LinkedIn, make some connections, look at the past records, look what's in the CRM, talk to everybody that's on this account, and then bring forward a plan and share it with me and the partner that handed this to you and say, is this right? Would you do anything different? And now let's get into drivership and make it happen. But I think she just never had the realization that she actually could control her own destiny, that she could own it, that she could own her own reality. And so once we started to have this aha, we could have much more constructive conversations because I could say, okay, blank canvas, what do you want to do? What is the life you want? What is the outcome you want? Now paint it. Let's work on this together. And the things that are getting in your way, let's figure out how to unblock those. But ultimately, she had to want it. We had to get to a place where she even understood she could want it. So I think a lot of salespeople, either because of tough managers or no one's ever, like I said at the beginning, there's not a school for this. No one came to me when I was a young salesperson in the financial industry and saying, you own your own success, right? This is how you do it. It was just like, here's a phone. Here's a stack of note cards. Here's some training in New York City. Go make it happen. And so it kind of had some baked in, but I don't think any of us really knew what that meant. So ownership is like a commitment to yourself to realize that you can author your own story. What do you want the end to be? Now fill in the chapters and make it happen.
Right, right. I think that's very interesting. And I think you're right. People don't think of it. And when they do think of it, they don't realize how much of it really is up to them, is in their own hands. I think it's important that you're bringing that up. Now, how did you get started on this journey? Perhaps you could just give us a little background as how
Yeah.
you ended up founding, improving sales performance and leading to your book, Iceberg Selling.
Thank you for asking that. So I'm one of those individuals, those individuals that just had to learn by doing. While I have an MBA and I've got the degrees and I was in school, I was always someone that just wanted to be out doing and learning and experiencing. So ever since I was a little kid, I loved ideas. I loved imagination and trying to solve problems. Like if you ever did box tops or anything like that as a fundraiser at school, I was the kid that knocked on all the doors in all the neighborhoods because it was so fun. So I think, my first part of my origin story is I feel like selling is ideas and helping people grab onto something that you think could help them and then moving it forward. And it's fun. It's like planning a surprise party for a friend and they're smiling, like you create a new reality. So that's kind of what is like my internal engine. But over the years, I've had a lot of different companies. I've had a lot of success. I've also had some tough times. In 2010, I had to declare bankruptcy because I had a digital marketing firm. We were doing great, recognized internationally. That great recession came. A huge portion of my business was real estate developments and ad agencies, and everybody had kind of frozen. So I had to reinvent myself. And when I reinvented myself, I said, what problem can I solve this time? And I kind of looked at myself as an entrepreneur and realized, hey, I was the only guy really selling. Even though we had 30 people, why was that? Well, and then I started to say, well, Carl, every time you hired other people, it never worked out. Well, why was that? What did I own in that? It couldn't have been just a batch of bad hires, right? Like that some level, the odds don't support that. So I
Right.
started to realize, what was my own role in this? And then I started to kind of go, okay, wait a minute. I know a gazillion other business owners, entrepreneurs, folks with $2 to $50 million companies. And I was like, they all struggle with this. They hire a bunch of salespeople. Sometimes it works out. Sometimes they say, I wish I could clone myself. They've never really managed or run a sales organization. Okay, there's something here. So from that, I started a journey where I started to kind of reverse program. Like, what does a company need to be successful? How do I look at sales holistically? Not just like, I need to go to 5 to 10 million, like make it happen. No magic bullets. I didn't want to live in the world of magic or hope. as one of my friends says. Like I wanted to live in the world of fundamentals and just smart thinking. And so my first book is called Set Up to Win. And it's really about three frameworks to building a high-performing sales organization. I would even say happy. And I had to kind of get real with myself and say, what are those fundamentals? And how does the owner or leader get out of their own way and realize that it's about empowering their team and being a change agent and moving things forward? So that was kind of this first aha for me, was like, okay, I can help these other companies build foundations. And then the second part of that journey was I realized that there were all these salespeople that had big hearts. They really loved sales. They wanted to bet on themselves. They realized they made a difference, and yet they found themselves stuck. They're not playing as well as they would like. They're frustrated. They're stressed, probably scared. Like, am I going to keep this job? Even though they had great skills. And then I would look at the owners, and the owners would just be like, I'm doing everything I can. I was like, wow, this is almost like a marriage where, like, how come these two aren't getting together, that they both want to raise their kids together? Like, what's going on here? And so I started to realize that a lot of the salespeople, as well as the sales leaders, just, if I could help them change their mindset, like we talked about, if I could help them envision sales as an iceberg and realize that they're living in above the surface all the time, and if they could just slow themselves down, learn how to interact with people better, learn how to build rapport, learn how to co-create solutions, learn how to be confident enough that helping people have next steps was seen as helping someone, not of a head trash of like being salesy and being like, when's our next meeting? Like, but helping them just kind of get some fundamentals and raise their game, that really great things would happen. And that's what inspired me to write the book. Is I started to see this all the pieces of the book play out. That's how I'd sold all my life. I'd been a very successful salesperson, but then I started to kind of teach this and immerse other people in it and give bits and pieces of this over many years. And then I would see it work, and I was like, wait a minute, there's a book here to really help salespeople achieve the life that they want. And in doing so, they help the entrepreneur, they help the company. In doing so, we help the economy. There's so many things that start with sales. And so I think it was just a journey of self-discovery of what I believe and how I can support others. And that's how the book came about.
That's so interesting. And I really give you a lot of credit for not only seeing that opportunity, but to actually move forward on it. It's really a tough job to write a book. I really admire you for having pulled that all together and written books that really provide so much insight for people. I think that people who are in sales have a lot of the books like you talk about that are more focused on the magic side of it and less on the practical application. So I think that your books are valuable resources for anybody in sales, certainly worth taking the time to read and see how we can up our game a little bit. Now, Karl, you've shared so many interesting things. How can people connect with you? I think people, of course, would love to read your books, but perhaps there's people who want to ask you questions, have something further they'd like to explore. Where can we find you?
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And to open the door to that, I do invite anyone listening, reach out to me on LinkedIn, or go to one of my two websites, improvingsalesperformance.com. That's my business with my team, where we come in and we do everything from running peer groups to running workshops. I do keynotes. We come in as kind of like fractional leaders. We also just kind of up level teams and individuals. So we live in the world of like, how do we holistically improve sales organizations, and how do we support the sales leaders and the people doing the sales? The other website is Iceberg Selling, which is all about the book. The book is super fun too. It's super fast. It's 111 pages. It's on Audible too. It's written by a salesperson for salespeople. So if you're like, oh my God, another business book? No, this is a sales guy, sales gal, salesperson book. It's accessible. And it's written in a way that you can get through it really fast, I think.
Oh, that's great. Well, I'm going to include all of that in the show notes. And Karl, I would like to thank you so much for joining us here today on A Seat at the Table. I've learned a tremendous amount from you, and I think a lot of people listening to this have also. So thanks again for taking the time to be here with us.
And thank you. I really had a great time. I love your show and all the topics you've been covering.
Thank you.